Hello and welcome. The government of India has banned 59 Chinese mobile applications or apps as they're called on the grounds of threat to sovereignty and security under 69A of the Information Technology Act. Now, this is obviously come as a surprise to many, but in some ways not, because this follows the escalation of tensions at the India-China border, and there have been several calls to ban Chinese apps in the past as well. Now, TikTok, which is the most affected of these apps, has already responded with a statement saying that the government of India has issued an interim order. We have been invited to meet with concerned government stakeholders for an opportunity to respond and submit clarifications. We have not shared any information of our users with any foreign government, including China. Further, if we are requested in future, we would not do so. And then it goes on to say that it has democratized the internet by making it available in Indian languages. And the number externally is that there are about 600 million downloads of TikTok at this point. TikTok obviously leads the pack, but there are many, many other apps which are sitting on most probably your mobile phone as much as mine, which are of Chinese origin. And the fear and the threat is that the data that it's collecting from our behavior and our consumption is being transferred to Chinese servers, and that's being another operative word. So there are three or four questions which are critical here. One is, how is this going to play out? How is it practically going to work when government issues an order saying this company or this app has been banned? And there is a distinction between the two. The second is, what is the security threat that we are talking about? And to that extent, what damage has already been done that we should be at least aware of? And third, is this going to be like a long-term thing, or is this likely to resolve itself? To discuss this, I'm joined by two experts in the field, Nikhil Pava, founder of Media Nama, a technology and policy publication, and also by Blaise Fernandes, a board member of Gateway House, a leading think tank focusing on many things, including, of course, India and China. So thank you both for joining me. So Nikhil, I know we've been talking now for the last 14 hours about this, but as you look at it overnight, what are your distilled takeaways of this action and what it means?
So, Govind, I think this action is in response to sustained tensions between India and China at the border, but at the line of actual control. But also, I think there was a report in some Indian publications quoting government sources about 3 or 4 days ago that there has been a sustained cyber attack on Indian installations, Indian websites over the last a couple of months since tensions have been escalating. So I think also let's not forget that about a year ago, in fact in July last year, Swadeshi Jagran Manch and a bunch of other entities actually called for a ban on TikTok in India, and they called for a ban earlier this year as well. So this is all of this coming together right now. But so I think this is so as we speak, TikTok is no longer available on the Google Play Store in India, and that's really prompt response. I don't know whether that response is from Google or it's from TikTok, but I think it's really prompt that the order was issued last night, because usually it takes a little time for these things to be implemented. The other thing to bear in mind is that it seems to have been an emergency order that was issued, because usually under the Section 69A rules, there have to be meetings that are held between the government officials and the platforms. And in fact, to the extent that there are meetings with platforms once every couple of days. The third really noteworthy thing, and I think for me this is the one that stands out, is that Section 69A orders are meant to be confidential. The government doesn't need to announce them. They have never disclosed these orders before. So this is the first time that I'm seeing a press release on a Section 69A order. We've been calling for this removal of secrecy for a while. So to me, this is a political statement that's being made by the government. They wanted people to know the fact that these things have been banned. And so I can get into more issues later.
Right. Got it. Blaise, tell us, so you've been arguing that, these apps are a security threat because of the way they collect the data and the way they obviously transmit the data to foreign countries, in this case being Chinese servers. So walk us through why you focused on this specifically and what your findings have been.
Okay, to start with, I think besides 69A of the IT Act 2000, WTO also has enough of provisions for any sovereign state to do anything economically to protect their integrity, their interest, and national security. So it's not only, it's a globally accepted norm that if there are border skirmishes or aggressions on the border, WTO gives you enough of powers to kind of take what needs to be done to secure your environment. There's an old saying in the strategic world. In China, one doesn't know where the party ends, the state begins, and where the state ends and the and business begins. It's all very blurred, you know. So any app that originates from China, one really doesn't know whether it's government funded, etc. Given the blurriness, there's always going to be red lights flashing for any apps coming from China. Even in the United States, there have been a lot of measures put in. There's no aggression there. I mean, there's a trade war going on there, but there's no border skirmishes. Yes, there have been cybersecurity attacks between the two countries, but even the United States, they put enough of measures in the last 6 weeks or last 8 weeks to ensure that these apps have been ring fenced. For example, if you are a government employee, I don't think you can have TikTok on your app. Now, in terms of security angles, in terms of security threats, we can probably classify them into a number of ways. Can these apps be used for propaganda? The answer is yes. Sitting out of China, can I kind of upload videos that can foment trouble, sectarian violence, or kind of border upheavals? The answer is yes, because there's no control. Second is that can these apps be used in terms of strategic propaganda, in terms of promoting, China has some great films that have done well in the Chinese box office. Never outside India, it's always about the BRI, and it's always about, the great Chinese power coming to the rescue of the world. I can't get the name of the films. There have been Chinese songs that have kind of tried to foment trouble in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Can these be used? Can the same strategy be used in India? Yes. So I think you've got to look at it from multiple dimensions. It is a security threat. And lastly, if the data is residing in any market which is outside India and you don't really have control over it, it's always going to be a security threat. And this is not only for Chinese apps, but this is for any apps. At the end of the day, it could originate from Russia, it could originate from America. So by and large, these are the 3 or 4 areas of security issues that need to be discussed.
Right. Okay, Nikhil, so there is an app like TikTok. There is a company, ByteDance. In the case of ByteDance and TikTok, both are resident in India, as in the company is here, there are people here, which is a little different from, let's say, an app which is floating around in app space, which you download, you really don't know where it comes from, and you use it fleetingly or maybe more, and that's the end of that relationship. So are we to look at these distinctions a little more finely, or does it not matter?
Look, to my mind, I don't think it matters, because there is a close relationship between all companies that have originated in China and are largely operating out of China, even though they may have a specific entity for India. So, and that happens in most countries, right? So, and most businesses, they may have a business like a private limited in India that is going to be the sales office for India, but effectively the content is typically controlled outside of India. Decisions are taken outside of India. So there is, content apps, especially those like TikTok, are often find that there is content that's been censored. In fact, as I remember, there was a story that I saw about someone who had created a WeChat account in which they had put as a password, mind you, ban CCP, which is the Chinese Communist Party, right? And their WeChat account got shut down immediately, even though these apps are not supposed to be able to look at passwords in the interest of security. So there is either implicit or explicit control of China over its apps. The other thing I'd like to add to this is that if you go back to the Doklam standoff, at that point in time, there was a rumor or there was gossip going around in the tech policy circles that the government is thinking of banning UC News, which is the news entity, the news aggregated entity owned by UC Browser, which is owned by Alibaba. And why? Because it seems that UC News, which was operating in India and paying Indian bloggers to blog on it, was artificially suppressing any news stories that were critical of China and allowing stories that were essentially putting forth a Chinese point of view. So at this point in time, when there is a face-off between the two countries, that kind of a propaganda war, not just in terms of what you write, but also what you allow users to see, it can have a significant impact.
Right.
So I think India has taken a decision in national interest in order to prevent these apps from trying to influence the narrative. And I think that's a decision which we have to leave it to our government to take.
Right.
You know,
so
at the time of a crisis.
Yeah.
That's a decision of
another
sovereignty.
quick question on how is this going to play out? So does this mean that, okay, so further downloads are obviously not possible, but what about continuous, interacting with these apps today? And UC Web, since you mentioned, is also one of the 59 apps banned. So does this mean that I cannot use the app at all now?
Also, UC Browser, just remember 4 years ago, UC Browser was the largest browser in India. So it's still the second largest browser in India after Google Chrome. Now, how this is going to play out, I just tried TikTok on my phone this morning to see if it's working. I've had it downloaded for a year, and it seems to be working just fine. There are updates that are coming in. It's just not there on the Play Store, on the Android Play Store that I checked. Now, the blocking is much easier on a store, and if you remember when TikTok was banned or temporarily banned by the Madras High Court last year, it was removed from the Play Store. But if you had the app, it continued functioning. In fact, that ban led to a greater proliferation of TikTok, and more people started using it. So the Streisand effect came into play because more people became aware of it. At this point in time, if the app itself has to be stopped from functioning, it will have to be at an ISP level, at a DNS level, and I'm sure the notices would have gone out to ISPs to go and implement this ban. We don't know how soon it will stop functioning, but remember that there are TikTok is full of social media influencers who make a lot of money, and this is their primary sort of livelihood now. So there's those, and even though we might look at it disparagingly or say that someone's making money of just making funny videos, but they do that. It's their livelihood. Yeah. So they are going to get affected. And we don't know what the quantum of that money is. I don't think influencers probably make more of the money, and TikTok probably makes less in India. In that
but there
sense.
is an income. There is an income stream, is what you're saying, Nikhil. I'll just quote another figure.
There's a TikTok economy. There's a TikTok economy at play in India right now.
Exactly.
Itself.
Nikhil,
like there is a YouTube economy. So, I was seeing Chinese apps which accounted for only 3 of the top 10 most downloaded apps in India in 2015. By 2019, it was 6 of the top 10 spots. And because of the size of the Indian market, more app downloads than any country outside of China, in India, that is. So this is from a site called Marco Polo, which also lists which are the most top 10 downloaded apps in India. And of course, many of them are Chinese. So Blaise, let me come to you. So if we are seeing this now as a cyber security and a cyber defense in the national context, so therefore it means that a lot of things have to be visited or revisited again. So tell us how we need to strategically, or how will this evolve strategically? I mean, will it end with Chinese apps? Could this go beyond that? And even with Chinese apps, there could be other ways that data is being captured and transmitted. How do we stop that?
I think to start with, I think the government's kind of been pretty they have a calibrated decision on what they've done in terms of these apps. So if you notice, the economic activity apps where Chinese companies have stake or have investments have been left aloof. Baidu and all these apps which has economic activity, because that impacts people's livelihoods on a day-to-day basis, that impacts the consumer on a day-to-day basis, they've not been put to the ban list despite the fact that there's Chinese investment in it. The second, the apps that they've gone after are the vanity apps, which is like, if TikTok is banned, yes, TikTok does impact livelihoods, but as per the reports originating from ByteDance revenues from India was 25 crores for Q4 of 2019. So that's a 25 crore impact. Okay, and Nikhil, I hope you're right. I hope you're right that of the
That is hilarious.
majority of the money went to the influencers and TikTok kept 5 because, per my knowledge, the aggregator keeps most of it and the and the content creator gets it. But let's keep that for another day. The second type of apps that they kind of listing is the service apps. Now, there are many apps that actually offer you service by way of file transfers, etc., etc. If these apps are banned, you're not good. Life is not going to be impacted. You can probably move to another file sharing app which is not from China. So they've kind of kept that in.
I would disagree, Blaise, on that count. I think that if you look at ShareIt, right, there is literally, it's very difficult to find an alternative to ShareIt. It is by far the single most popular app that is used for people to transfer to new phones when they buy a new phone, which are often, so these are not, it's not easy to transfer your
functionality. There are sharing apps on the Play Store. It's just that one app. With due credit to the Chinese app economy, the way they're designed is they're light to use. You can use it even on 2G. Right. That's the attraction. That's the attraction, and that's where they get the numbers. They're not heavy in terms of size. They're light to use. On another point, I'm just digressing a bit. UC browser, okay? Yeah. If you see the maps of India that appear in UC browser, you check the history of the Indo-China war. It's something that you've never read before in your life. So I'm just kind of digressing a bit since UC browser was mentioned in the past. So they've kind of kept the utility apps aside. They've not yet tapped the strategic apps. There are many apps that are strategic in nature, People's Daily, etc., which are available, and that is not Chinese propaganda. The US government last week issued a memo in Congress stating that these apps and these publications and these networks of television networks, radio networks, will be now classified as propaganda machines. And I think the government will have to look at that shortly.
Right. So last question. We're running out of time. Nikhil, let me start with you. So so one is what the government does, and and takes these steps, and then uses ISPs and so on. What should I, as a user, be careful of? I mean, assuming this is detrimental to national security, and and we all mostly agree with it, or if we do, then I too, as a user, should be taking adequate care about what apps I download and how I use them. So, any suggestions and thoughts there?
Yeah, my first recommendation would be to, if you're looking for alternatives to Chinese apps, please be very, very careful about what you end up downloading, because there are going to be Indian clones, etc., that are going to be promoted, saying that if you're not using this, use this, and please go for global alternatives, because while you might be doing what you think is in national security, and when you're thinking that what you're doing is in India's interest by getting an Indian app, we're not necessarily sure of the security measures that have been taken. Usually global apps that face threats across the globe have a higher level of security because they get attacked more. So please be very careful about what you switch to. Secondly, please see Android has permissions where you can give or revoke access to various aspects. So, for example, you can remove after you've done your OTP verification. You should remove access to SMS and messages for every app. You should control whether they're able to access your location at all times or not. So there are, Android by itself has provisions that allow you to protect yourself and prevent your data from being collected. So please be conscious of some of those aspects. To my mind, I don't think this is going to, at this time next year, we probably won't be having this kind of a discussion. So when things come back to normal, take a call on whether you want to go back to an app that you used to use or not.
Okay, thanks, Nikhil, for that. Blaise, as we wind up, how do we be more alert, careful, secure?
I'm hoping for that. This time next year, if things resolve, if things are back to normal, I hope there are enough of ring fences put out by the government to ensure security. So, for example, data should be stored locally. okay, and it should be stored state by state with a direct connection to the cybersecurity cell of each state. If there's a problem in Tamil Nadu and you're monitoring Delhi, first and foremost, you don't know Tamil, so the issue is in Tamil. Or if it's in Orissa, you don't know Orissa, so there has to be a state-to-state connection or with the cybersecurity cell. I think that's the first thing they need to do.
Right. Can
I just respond to that?
Yeah, I'll just come back to you, Nikhil. So okay. Another question, Blaise. What if we are talking about the vanity apps and the entertainment apps and the social network apps that have been largely targeted. Now, what about financial and fintech and so on? I mean, because currently this has not been mentioned. You yourself said commerce seems to be have kept out of that, but that could also be an area of concern, right?
Absolutely. So therefore, I said the apps shouldn't, if you read our blog in Gateway House, we've actually said that whoever's operating in India with Chinese investment, you can't give them a free run. You've got to build enough of moats around the castle, ensuring that, there are enough security measures. One of the things that the US government has done is after a certain class of employees, you cannot have certain apps on your phones. So that's a security measure that is put in place. Data stored locally, curation centers, these are all measures that needs to be taken, and the government of India needs to make sure that these are implemented at the local level.
And yes, Nikhil, quickly, go ahead.
So two very quick points. Number one, you never know where a cyber sort of leakage of data can come from. So, for example, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a app called Strava, which was used for running and collecting data about your fitness, etc. And when their data leaked, people were able to plot the patrols around the Indo-Pak line of control because soldiers were using it. So especially defense establishments, we need to be very careful about which apps to use and how many apps to use. Second, on the point of data localization, I completely disagree with Blaise because it creates honeypots. I would rather have a situation where a hacker doesn't know where my data is stored rather than if it's being stored in specific data centers in India, and the C certs or the state level certs are in most states are not even operational right now. So we have to get our cybersecurity act together.
Right, and that's another discussion which we should have, and we will very soon. Now that this issue is up and about, we've run out of time. Thank you both for joining me and shedding light and sharing your thoughts and insights on what the challenges are ahead as we go ahead from this point of banning these 59 apps. Thank you both for joining me.